They stuffed me in the corner. I don't think they wanted me to speak. I'm Stanton. I'm Pop's oldest grandson. Dadgummit, how I do this. I'm Pop's oldest grandson, and spent the last week thinking what to say. And this morning, my 5-year-old daughter Savannah, look, she could tell I was upset. I'm much like Dad and Pop, and I don't get sad very often. And she said, "Dad, don't be sad. Pop's in heaven running right now. He's with his mom." So, thank you, Savannah. I appreciate that. So, as I said, I'm one of Pop's grandchildren, and how blessed were we that we got that. Much like Derek said, people adopted Pop as their grandfather. We had friends that are here today that didn't have grandparents, or they were not in state, and they adopted Pop. Pop was a journaler, as many know, and during this time we found journal entries back to 1991. So I spent hours trying to read through those. If you read Pop's handwriting, it's tough. But there's 3 takeaways that I had that I could tell stories all day, and my brothers would cut me off pretty quickly. So the first thing was reading through probably 3 hours of journals. There is not one mention of anyone negatively in the entire journal. How many people can you say do that? I know I'm guilty of it. Many people are. That wasn't Pop. Now, food, that's a different story. The food, if it was bad or overpriced, he was writing it down. This my second takeaway, and something I didn't appreciate as a child, I guess, but now having kids, and even 2 young kids, it's so hard to have individual relationships with each one. Pop had individual relationships with each of his 3 grandchildren, along with everyone in this room. If you knew Pop, you didn't have to meet him, he met you with what your interest was. So for Pop and I, it was Duke basketball, talk before every game, during the game, after the game, whatever. Like Derek said, you'd hear about the refs. So, big game tonight, Pop, I'll be watching. For Alexander, it was football, trips, and food. If you were anywhere east of the Mississippi, Alexander and Pop probably have a recommendation for you. So, and then Matt, I think that was probably the most selfless example of who Pop was. Smokies baseball was his and Matt's thing. And Pop in his 70s, maybe even his 80s, Matt might have been 17 going to Smokies games. But Pop would drive from Clinton to West Knoxville to pick up Matt, to drive to Smokies Stadium, watch the game, stay 3 hours after the game so Matt could get an autograph or a bat from some up-and-coming star, and then drive all the way back home. How many 70-year-olds would take that kind of time to individually have a relationship with each one? So I think that really tells the story. And the third thing, every achievement or stat we had in anything that these 3 boys did, Pop wrote down. So the one about Alexander that I liked the best was he wrote that Alexander had achieved some award at school and how he was an amazing boy. For Matt, he wrote that Matt threw a no-hitter, and goes on to say that it was giving up 3 runs and 6 walks, so there was no hits given up. And then my favorite was he wrote, Stanton played a great game, 10 tackles, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery. Next sentence, Alexander played offense. So, that was my personal favorite. And I think Pop would appreciate the laughter and the stories, and like Mom said, Dadgummit, I looked at Mom. He didn't want us to be sad, and I remember him telling us, probably 10, 15 years ago, I'm outlive all my friends, no one's going to show up to my funeral. Boy, he was wrong. So lastly, I just want to thank everyone for taking time out of your Saturday. It means the world to us. Like Preacher said, the texts, the calls, the hugs, checking in, it does mean a lot. So thank you all, and that's it.
Hello, my name is Alexander Oster. I'm the second oldest grandson of Stanton Oster. I'd like to just reiterate everything that the family said. Just thank you for coming today and being here for us and for all the thoughts and prayers and support during this time. I'd like to start by reading Psalms 73, 24 through 26. You guide me with your counsel, and afterwards you will receive me to glory. Whom have I in heaven but you? And there's nothing on earth that I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. And I just think that's a great verse, and we can rest assured that he's with Jesus today and whole again. So I've been thinking this last week of what should I say for my pop. Even though he was 95, I just always thought he was immortal and would live forever. He was such a wonderful and kind man that did live 95 years. And starting out, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you to God for allowing him to be on this earth for 95 years. And thank you to Pop for being such a light throughout his life and in everything he did. I think all the people speaking before me, that just shows the type of human he was. Him and I both had an incredible bond, and I know we both had a tremendous amount of respect for each other. He would always say to me when I left him these last few months, "Thanks for taking care of me. You are a gem, and I'm so proud of you." I always told him taking care of him at the end of his life was the least I could do. He did way more for me throughout my life, and I could never repay him for that. He was a true gem in my eyes. Right before Pop's passing, I was honored to be given his Bible that I have here today. Throughout this last week, actually, Debbie was speaking on the same thing too. I think that just shows the human he was. But throughout this last week, I had the fruits of the Spirit on my heart, which is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. I could not believe it, but when I sat down to look at the last thing Pop had marked in his Bible, it was Galatians 5:22-23, which is, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." And I was so moved, and I began to cry. That was the last thing that was marked in his Bible, and there's notes galore all on the page. And I think that was God and Pop talking to me, because he really did live with the fruits of the Spirit. Another thing I found in this Bible too was the acronym JOY. And next to joy, it was Jesus first, others second, yourself last. I know he followed that acronym JOY, and he lived with the fruits of the Spirit until his last breath. When I think of Pop, what do I think of? Several things, but I kind of broke it down to three here. The first is definitely all the Lady Vols games we went to over the years. Pop began taking us to these games when I was 2.5. My oldest brother was 3.5. I actually read his journal this week, and it makes sense how I was so obese as a kid. At 2.5, he said Alexander ate 3 cheese crystals and 2 hot dogs on the way to the game. At 2.5 years old. But we sat in section 102 for nearly 20 seasons during the Pat Summitt era. There were so many memories created at these games over the years with Pop. Pop also got to know our friends at these games, along with our then girlfriends and now wives. These same friends were able to celebrate his 95th birthday with all of us on January 18th before his passing. It was truly a full circle moment. The second thing I think of is all the road trips we went on. We would always go to Athens to watch the Lady Vols take on Georgia. On our way home, we would stop in Atlanta to watch the Hawks games. Pop was never a huge NBA fan, but he would always take us. That just shows the type of selfless person he was. He knew I especially had a liking for the NBA basketball, and he watered that interest of mine. Pop had such a gift of pouring into his grandsons, like my brother Stanton said, our different interests throughout our lives. He actually watched an entire Hawks game on TV with me a few weeks before his passing. that will be a core memory I will carry with me for a very long time. I was actually thinking too, I was going to leave at halftime because that was kind of a time that he was sick and he wouldn't let me leave. He said, no, let's watch the whole game. Another thing, him and I went to, he was from West Virginia, and him and I went to 2 West Virginia spring football games when I was interested in attending school there. One of the most memorable solo trips we had is when he and I went to the NFL Hall of Fame was when I was a senior in high school. So there's a lot of funny things about our trips, some of which I shouldn't repeat, but some funny things. So when we were young kids, Pop would pull over and would pull over to a rest stop to rest his eyes. At the time, I think we were all under 10 years old. He just trusted that we would stay in the car at the rest stop. Crazy to think doing that now. At 12 years old, Pop made me the official travel agent for our road trip crew. He handed the credit card over to me and had me book the hotels, tickets, and plan everything. I've definitely always been an old soul, that is for sure, and I have him to thank for that. Before I became the travel agent, Pop would always book us in a 2-story, what he would call a motel. I made sure to book what I would call a hotel when I got the credit card. When our oldest brother turned 15, Pop was pretty much done driving on these trips. Unless it was in Atlanta traffic, and I'm not sure we were any safer with him driving. I'm fortunate enough to spend my time going to Hawks games now in my adult life, and I can't help but always think about him every time I'm down there. Lastly, the yard work. As our cousin Derek said, Pop loved working in the yard. He had a garden for many years and did the majority of the yard work himself with the help of his 3 grandsons, our cousin Derek, and Daniel. And I know as kids growing up, that was not something we wanted to be doing most of the time. But between him and my dad, they both instilled such work ethics in all 3 of us. Pop did pay us though, so that helped a little bit. During this time, we also got to be around our older cousin Derek. As cousins, we've had many good times and funny stories to tell because of all these times we were at Pop's helping him out in the yard or around the house. We probably would not have had that connection based on our age difference alone if it wasn't for Pop. Pop had such a gift of bringing people together in special ways. Pop was what you would call a people person. He would hardly go through the drive-thru at the bank, pharmacy, or fast food restaurants because he cared about face-to-face interactions with people. Actually, I don't know if he's still here, but Pop's pharmacist Jim is here, and Jim and his daughter Veronica, we grew up going to school together, and Pop all the time would say, I saw Veronica's dad today at the pharmacy. He always enjoyed seeing Jim. He always made it a point to ask any service worker their name and would always address them by their name. In his final months with us, he was incredibly sick and in and out of the hospital. He still made it a point to form a connection with the medical staff just by simply asking their name and thanking them. He definitely did not fit the stereotype of an accountant. He was the polar opposite. I always thought he wanted me to be an accountant. He would always bring me different accounting books when I was growing up. Pop also loved his magazines and giving those to his grandsons when we saw him. I can only imagine how much he spent on magazine subscriptions. He had every sports magazine, Consumer Report, car and driver magazines. I still blame him for my addiction to get a new car every year or 2 because of those car and driver magazines. There was a time between the ages of 18 and 20 when I bought a new car every year. The only problem is I needed a co-signer at that time of my life. So who did I call? Pop. He would always drop what he was doing and say, no problem, tell me where to meet you. I will miss him so much in all of our phone calls. He truly was one of my best friends. We've been speaking on the phone almost daily since I was in middle school. I would be in middle and high school telling him I was so jealous he was retired. I would always make him call me and let me know he made it home after he dropped us off after Lady Ball's games. As I got older and would be at UT football games or Hawks games, I would always think to call him on the way into the game to make sure he knew I was there and to turn the game on. I will miss being able to do that and all the phone calls we have had throughout the years. I'll especially miss being Pop's barber. When his mobility declined 5 years ago, he asked me to start cutting his hair. He never did have facial hair until the last 7 or 8 years. He always loved that him and I both had beards. He would always ask me how I trimmed it, what I used, even bought him the same comb that I had. He did not like anyone else to be his barber. He loved having me cut his hair. I still remember a few weeks ago, he called me and said he needed a haircut. I told him he was on the list of things to do and I would get by in the next day or two. He called me the next day. I still need a haircut. How big is your list? I get there, he didn't even need a haircut. I just trimmed his ears. He just loved the attention. And
He asked me how many clients you had.
he would just sit there like a dog at the groomer. He just loved it. I cut his hair for the last time on Friday before his 95th birthday. Those were such sweet moments. I will remember those forever. I feel like I got to serve him and pay him back just for a little bit for all he did for my whole life. Lastly, if you know Pop, you know the man loved ice cream, candy, and sodas. He always kept a garage fridge with 15 to 20 different drink options, candy jars, 3 to 4 different ice cream options at all times. During his final days and weeks, food brought him so much joy. He would ask me and other family members for all kinds of different meals, treats, and drinks. I'll never forget, one of the last things he said to me when I left Tuesday night when he started to decline was, "I love you. You've been a great doctor. I still need my 7-Up." I'll remember those words forever. Don't worry, Pop. I'll bring your 7-Up when we meet up again in heaven. I love you, Pop.